Just a few decades ago, if someone said China would one day become one of the most powerful nations on Earth, most people would have laughed. In the early 1990s, China wasn't even close to being a major player. It was largely poor, rural, and unknown on the global economic map. Most of the population lived in villages, working in farms, or doing low-income labor. The cities weren't developed. The country had barely recovered from the effects of wars and political chaos. But fast forward to today, and China is no longer a quiet observer. It's a superpower, not just economically, but politically, technologically, and even militarily. So, how did this massive transformation happen? What steps did China take that other countries missed? And more importantly, what can the rest of the world learn from it? China didn't become powerful by accident. It wasn't luck. It wasn't magic. It was the result of smart decisions, long-term vision, and ruthless focus on growth. Unlike many developing nations that stayed stuck in cycles of corruption, short-term politics, and dependence on foreign aid, China went the opposite way. It decided to take control of its own future. One of the first things China did right was embracing the idea of progress, even if it meant changing its own system. It didn't get stuck in old ideologies or pride. While still under communist rule, China started allowing capitalist-style markets to grow. It gave room for private businesses, foreign companies, and international trade. Instead of fearing globalization, it welcomed it with a strategy. They created special zones where international businesses could come in, build factories, and produce goods for export. These areas, known as special economic zones, became growth machines. They attracted foreign investment, created jobs, and transferred technology and skills to Chinese workers. In short, China didn't just work for others, it learned from them. And while foreign companies were setting up factories, China was paying attention. They studied the processes, the management, the machines, everything. It wasn't just about cheap labor. It was about absorbing knowledge. They weren't just doing the work. They were preparing to one day run the show themselves. And eventually, they did. China also invested where many others hesitated, in infrastructure. Roads, airports, ports, high-speed trains, even entire cities were built, sometimes before they were even needed. It seemed like overkill, but that's the difference between short-term thinking and long-term vision. While other countries wait for things to break before they fix them, China builds for the future. Today, this early investment has paid off. Goods move faster, trade is smoother, and industries are connected like never before. Another key factor was education and talent. China understood the importance of knowledge. Instead of pretending they knew everything, they accepted the gap and filled it. Millions of students were sent abroad to study in top universities, and when they returned, they brought back ideas, systems, and innovations that helped build the new China. The country poured billions into research, science, and technology. And slowly, it shifted from just being the world's factory to becoming the world's laboratory, creating its own brands, products, and technologies. And while all this was happening, the Chinese government stayed consistent. Unlike many countries where leadership changes mean policy changes, China stuck to its core goals. It didn't let five-year politics get in the way of 50-year dreams. Whether it was fighting poverty, boosting exports, building tech, or improving infrastructure, the agenda stayed clear. That stability allowed long-term projects to grow without interruption. Another smart move was controlling what really mattered: supply chains and manufacturing. Today, the world depends on China to produce everything from phones to clothing to medicine. And once a country becomes essential to the world's economy, it gains power without even having to flex. That's the silent strength China built, becoming necessary. Now, many critics point out the negatives. Yes, China has its share of problems. There's censorship, debt issues, human rights debates. But when it comes to economic growth, infrastructure planning, and technological ambition, China has written a playbook that developing nations can learn from. Too often, countries waste decades blaming the past, waiting for aid, or getting stuck in political noise. They look outside for help, but don't look inside to change. China, instead, focused on one thing: results. They didn't talk too much. They acted. And every year, step by step, they rose. The biggest lesson here isn't just about policy, it's about mindset. China didn't accept its position as permanent. It didn't say, "We're poor, so we'll always be poor." It said, "We may be behind, but we're catching up." fast, and then it did the work. Silently, consistently. If other countries want to rise, they must stop looking for shortcuts. They must build infrastructure before it's needed. They must invest in education not for today, but for 20 years from now. They must allow innovation to flourish, and they must learn to work with the world, not against it. China's journey isn't perfect, but it is powerful, and it proves that any nation, no matter how far behind, can rise to the top. Not by waiting, not by copying, but by planning, learning, and never losing focus. The dragon didn't rise overnight. It rose through years of quiet effort. And now, the world watches, not in doubt, but in awe.